Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Before that chaotic alley, my life had a sense of routine. I had just finished intense training with my fellow Airborne Rangers at Fort Benning and was on a weekend leave. After the grueling experience, a few of us met at Mulberry Bar and Grill to relax. Despite being exhausted from the drive, I joined my friends for drinks, unaware that this night would change everything. After leaving the bar, I took a shortcut through an alley to reach my car faster. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found me. That's when I met Alana. At first, I didn't realize what was happening, but the tension was undeniable. My military instincts kicked in immediately. I encountered her in the middle of an attack. Two men stood in the alley, one armed with a knife. My name's Blake Ritter. I was trying to avoid a longer walk to my car, still in my full Ranger uniform. Despite my exhaustion, adrenaline took over as I assessed the situation. One man was armed, the other wasn't, and I had no weapon. But I had a plan. I stepped forward confidently, hoping to defuse the situation. "Gentlemen, I think the lady wants to be left alone." The man with the knife, half-dressed and sneering, didn't back down. "Screw you, soldier boy," he said, making his move. I focused on positioning the unarmed man to my left, knowing what I needed to do. The attacker lunged at me, but using my training, I managed to redirect his movement, causing him to accidentally injure his partner. He then slashed at me, and though I tried to dodge, I was still wounded. The pain was blinding. He came at me again, and though I partially dodged, his knife still pierced my chest just inches from my heart. He snarled, not caring that I seemed unfazed, though I was terrified. He reached for my tunic, but I caught his arm and, fueled by adrenaline, broke it at the elbow. His scream gave me a brief surge of energy. I disarmed him, drove his blade into his ribs, and twisted. He was dead, but I wasn't sure if I'd survive. I saw the girl move just as I collapsed to the ground. At least I'd won my final fight. Everything went dark. I welcomed it, needing to be alone. And I was. The quiet room and the monitors were the first signs I had survived. Barely moving, I scanned the ICU with my remaining eye. Soon, a nurse came in, pressed a button, and a doctor followed. I was examined for 20 minutes, and they confirmed I was alive. How observant. The morning shift woke me to check my vitals, followed by breakfast and a nurse who cleaned me up. Then the cops arrived. "You Blake Carson?" the short one asked. "That's the rumor," I said. "No ID on me to prove it." "You're a hero, Mr. Carson," he said. "Well, that's good, right?" I replied. "That's good," added the tall cop. "Did the girl survive?" I asked. "Yes, she's in another ward. Pretty banged up, but she asked about you. Said you handled those two guys well. Wants to see you to thank you," said the short cop. "Tell her it's not necessary. I'm not big on sentiment," I said. "Well, you saved her life. Those two guys were repeat offenders. One was a butcher. They were suspects in 12 Courtisane disappearance over the last 2 years. The DA owes you too." "They're dead?" I asked. "Yeah," the tall cop said. "Both very dead." "Good. Couldn't have happened to worse guys," I said. The doctors were worried about my chest wound. I lost my eye. They'd hoped to save it, but no luck. For a moment, I thought about changing my name to Jack One-Eye. That would have been neat. Maybe I still could. On about the 5th day, I had a visitor. A tall, slender woman in her 20s, wearing a smock, walked in. "Hi," she said. "Hi, can I get some more water? I'm pretty dry," I replied. "Sure, but I'm not a nurse. I'm Alana Nelson," she said. "Oh, sorry. The smock threw me off," I said. She refilled my cup and handed it back. "I'm the woman whose life you saved. I had to come thank you. The doctor said I could have a few minutes before I leave today. I've been upstairs until now." I looked at her, not remembering much since she'd been in rough shape last time we met. "Well, you're welcome. Just doing what any knight in shining armor would do," I joked. "You saved my life. I won't forget that," she said. I briefly thought a date would be a nice reward, but quickly pushed that thought aside. She was a sufferer. "Really, it was nothing. I was just lucky to be there," I said. "I was the lucky one. I owe you dinner at the very least," she said. "When you're out of here, I'd like to visit you. Maybe lunch or dinner." "Sure," I said. Looked like I was going to get that date after all. While I was laid up, some of my Ranger buddies visited, making jokes about being invincible and rescuing damsels in distress. Even Colonel Johnson stopped by. Despite losing my eye, I felt pretty good at first. The bad news? My injuries got me discharged. I loved being a ranger, so that was a tough blow. All that training down the drain. Damn. 2 weeks later, I was released. Alana must have had an inside source because she was waiting in the lobby when I came down. "Hi there, soldier," she greeted me. "If you don't have any plans, how about spending the day with me? Lunch, dinner, wine, whatever." This was turning out even better than I expected. No plans at all. They were going to call me a cab. Then it settled. "I'm driving, and you're my poor, poor man," she said, taking control of the wheelchair and pushing me outside. "I can walk," I told her. "Hospital rules say I have to ride until I'm out." She nodded, but kept pushing. I didn't mind being her poor, poor man. Once out of the wheelchair, we walked to her car. The sun on my face felt great, and sharing it with her made it even better. "Where to now?" I asked. "My house. It's close by." She smiled, leaving the rest unsaid, and I didn't push for more. She parked in front of a one-story ranch house and signaled for me to get out. Coming around to my side, she took my hand and led me inside. The house was simply but tastefully decorated. Oddly, there was no couch, just 3 wooden benches, likely made from raw tan wood from the Philippines. There were small tables with real flowers and vases scattered around. It was one of the most unusual living rooms I'd ever seen. Clearly, this woman was different. "I don't do things like everyone else," she said with a giggle. "I'm a bit of a wannabe artist." "It's nice, though. Unusual, but nice. Feels like an indoor garden," I said. "You nailed it. That's exactly what I was going for," she replied, teasing me. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Sure." "Does the eye patch bother you?" "No, I'm getting used to it. The doctor told me to take good care of my remaining eye and get plenty of rest," I replied. "I plan to follow his advice." "Smart move," she said. "What about your military career?" I shrugged. "It's over. The colonel pulled some strings so I could stay for 60 more days, but then I'm out." She thought for a moment. "Do you have a place to stay?" "I was going to find a room later. I didn't want to go back to the base, and I need to start looking for a job." "Then it's settled," she said. "Settled? You're staying here until you find a job in your own place." Her tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. I wasn't going to argue, especially since she was attractive, and I was open to the idea. "That would be a big help," I said sincerely. She changed clothes, and we headed out for lunch at a garden-themed restaurant. Clearly, she had a thing for plants. We sat in a shady spot and talked for 2 hours, learning the basics about each other. I was from California, south of LA, while she was from Columbus, Ohio, but had moved to Georgia for work. She managed an Art Deco shop downtown and had 2 sisters back in Ohio, one married and younger, the other older and single. Alana was single too, and I, of course, was unattached. My only family had been my fellow soldiers. She had a BA in art history, while I was a former ranger with some mechanical skills. After lunch, we were ready to head out. "Where to next?" she asked. "How about the park?" I suggested, though I wasn't sure I could walk much after 2 weeks in the hospital. "Sounds good," she agreed. We walked along the path with the sound of the brook adding a romantic touch. She took my hand, and we walked together. Then she stopped, turned to me, and kissed me softly. It was a delicate kiss, one I'd remember for years. First kisses are always special. We sat on a bench, and I decided to stop playing naive. I pulled her close and kissed her again, resting my hand on her thigh, which she didn't push away. After a few moments, I stood up, took her hand, and led her to a small, secluded area behind the bench. I laid my shirt down for her to sit on. My bare chest exposed the healing scar from my recent injury, which seemed to intrigue her. She touched it, then kissed it. "That scar makes you mine," she said. "Or maybe I'm yours." "Either way works," I replied. She undressed slowly and lay back on my shirt. I followed suit, and we enjoyed a passionate time together. She was incredible, and I realized I had fallen in love with her. "Was it good for you?" I asked, grinning. "Oh, yes," she replied. I looked at her closely. Faint bruises from the attack still lingered on her ribs and neck, reminders of what she'd been through. It felt strange to be lying there with her after such an intense experience. We hardly knew each other, but we had survived something life-changing together. Alana was tall, around 5'10", a shapely 140 pounds, with light brown hair and mesmerizing gray-blue eyes. She had a porcelain complexion and carried herself confidently. I was shorter at 5'7", steel-hard from ranger training, with average looks and light hair. Her bossy attitude showed she knew her worth, which I admired. That night, we didn't go to dinner. We went to bed, and by morning we were exhausted for all the right reasons. After a sleepless night, I officially moved in the next day, settling into the guest room for privacy, both for me and, I assumed, for her. We lived as roommates with benefits for a few months without ever saying the L word, but that was about to change. One rainy evening, she came home from work a little late. Around 7 p.m., I had finished my shift at Selwyn Motors, where I was now a certified master mechanic, and decided to cook dinner. I had a plan behind this gesture. "Wow, Blake, dinner! Did I forget an occasion?" she asked playfully. "No, well, yes," I said. "I'll explain over dinner." As she went upstairs to change, I rehearsed what I would say. I even disconnected the phone to avoid interruptions. I was ready. When she came back down, looking as lovely as always, we ate and drank her favorite Burgundy wine. After her first sip, I stood, knelt by her side, and said, "Alana, I've fallen in love with you. Will you marry me?" She stared at me in shock, and I felt my confidence waver. "Blake, I panicked. Did I do something wrong?" Tears filled her eyes. "No, you didn't do anything wrong, but Blake, you don't really know me." She motioned for me to sit back down, and I did. "Let me tell you about myself," she said. "I'm a free spirit. Before you, I slept with anyone I wanted, but since meeting you, I've been monogamous, and it surprises me. Yet, I don't fully trust myself. If those old urges return, I'll hurt you, and I couldn't stand that. Do you know what I was doing in the alley that night? I was about to give one of those men a favor when his friends showed up, and they decided to knock me instead. Then you saved me. Since then, I've been so in love with you that no one else has tempted me. But what if, one day, I stray? Could you forgive me? Could I forgive myself?" I took a deep breath. "Alana, I could forgive anything. I couldn't share you, but I love you so much. I'm willing to take the risk. We could go to counseling if needed, whatever it takes. So, will you marry me?" I knew it was a gamble, but I didn't care. I loved her, and I was prepared to fight for her, even if it meant facing the possibility of betrayal. We got married in front of a justice of the peace 3 weeks after that evening. The first 9 years were amazing, not just good. I believe Alana felt the same way. We had 2 children, Miranda and Shelby, in the 2nd and 3rd years of our marriage. We adored them, and our family was happy. When Shelby started school, Alana decided to go back to work. She found a job at an art studio and seemed content. I was glad for her. The job wasn't demanding, just 4 hours in the morning. And while the extra money wasn't necessary, it was nice to have. After about a year, she started working longer hours. She was supposed to pick up the kids from school, but I didn't notice much at first. Then, one day, I came home to find her sitting in the living room with a glass of Burgundy, waiting for me while the kids played outside. "Hi, sailor," she greeted me as I walked in, dirty and tired from work. "Hi," I replied, feeling oddly uneasy. She smiled, and we kissed. Then she said, "I have a surprise." "A surprise?" "Yes, there's an art show in San Francisco, and Gordon, my boss, invited me to go with him and the artist. We'll be gone for 4 or 5 days. Isn't it exciting?" I wasn't thrilled, but didn't know what to say. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, clearly not enthusiastic. "Honey, it's just a few days, and it's a great chance for me to see some incredible work. Georgia has shows, but nothing like what's on the coast," she explained. We talked for a while, and eventually I agreed. She'd never had an opportunity like this, so how could I refuse? She was leaving Saturday and would return Tuesday or Wednesday. I decided to do something fun with the kids over the weekend. On Saturday, the kids and I took Alana to the airport, had lunch, and waved goodbye as she headed to the departure lounge. I had a bad feeling, but with the kids by my side, it was easier to push it aside. Late Saturday night, she called. She told me they had arrived safely and gave me the number for the hotel where she'd be staying, in case of an emergency. She did say to call herself or anything else. Although I had started working out with some of my old Ranger buddies, Mark Hutchins and Gary Chapin, I believed, without much scientific basis, that exercising helped keep me fit, including protecting my good eye by improving circulation. After a decade of doing it, I was definitely in great shape. We all were. We were like the Three Musketeers, 21st century style. We also became experts with the Awara, a little-known Japanese invention. The Awara was a short stick, 3/5 of an inch in diameter and 4.5 inches long. If someone knew how to use it, they couldn't lose a fight if they got the first unblocked strike. Literally, could not. We always practiced together at the park for an hour on Sundays, no exceptions, and the rest of the week on our own. We always brought our kids along, too. They kind of mimicked us after practicing what we wanted them to. Both Shelby, my 7-year-old, and Miranda, 8, were tough but polite kids. As far as I knew, neither had ever been in a school fight. "Daddy, Daddy," Miranda said, "Mr. Hutchins says I did great today." She was beaming, and so was I. "That's awesome, sweetheart. Now go get your brother so we can head out," I said. Shelby was still with Mark, and they looked like mirror images as they practiced the shoddy form over and over. Gary, who had finished his routine, stood nearby, smiling widely. His 14-year-old son, Arthur, was lying on the ground near his 13-year-old daughter, Karen. They were both completely wiped out. I think they were in love, too. After breakfast at IHOP, the kids and I headed to the zoo. It was a fantastic day, and we all went to bed early. Alana called around 6 p.m., first speaking with the kids, then with me. She sounded drained. "Yeah, honey, I'm exhausted. The elevators were down for an hour because of a small fire on the ground floor. They put it out quickly, but I didn't want to wait, so I took the stairs, 9 flights, she said. I chuckled. "I told you that you should be working out with me and the kids," I joked. We talked for a while, and she told me about the things she'd seen and how amazing it all was. She loved art. But after the call, the uneasy feeling I had since she left came back strong. Then I did something I shouldn't have. I called the hotel and asked about the fire. My heart sank when they said I must be mistaken. There hadn't been a fire. Why would she lie? Without any real evidence, I started to suspect she was having an affair while talking to me. The mind can be a dangerous thing. Tuesday evening, the kids and I picked up my wife from the airport. The kids were excited, so my less than enthusiastic greeting went unnoticed. That night, we had sex. She did everything to make me happy she was back. I guess I was. But I had questions I wasn't ready to ask. Not yet. The next week was mostly normal, except for 2 things. On Tuesday and Thursday, Alana worked late, not coming home until after 9 p.m. She had never worked past 6:30 before. On both nights, she showered when she got home and claimed she was too tired for sex. My suspicion grew. I didn't have solid proof, and maybe the lie about the hotel fire had some explanation, but I felt sure I was right. The following Tuesday, Mark and his wife Elizabeth, who were also our neighbors, took care of the kids for the evening. I was parked across from the art shop where Alana worked. That night, my heart broke. I watched as Gordon Crowder wrapped his arms around my wife and kissed her passionately through the shop window. The store was closed and the lights were off except for the security lights behind them. 10 minutes later, they left, got in his car, and drove off. I followed them. The Pine Tree Motel doesn't have a restaurant, but it has rooms. They got one together and went inside. I went home. I'd already picked up the kids, and now I waited. Thoughts of liquidation crossed my mind. But before I could do anything, I wanted to confront her first. I hadn't forgotten her concerns before we got married. Now I wondered, how long had this been going on? How many times? She came home around 9:45. I was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. She froze when she saw me. "Blake?" "Yeah, it's me," I said, taking a sip. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "I don't know. You tell me. Let's start with your night at the Pine Tree." Her face went pale, and her shoulders slumped. "You know," I stayed silent. "I'm sorry, Blake. This has nothing to do with you or us. It was just Zex. I warned you I might not be able to give up Zex with other men. I've tried to keep it from you, but I guess I failed, huh?" she said. "It was the trip, wasn't it?" she continued. "I knew it was a bad idea. I even thought about bringing you so you wouldn't get suspicious. But Gordon insisted on the whole trip, and you would have complicated things for him." "Damn it," she muttered. "What's the appeal?" I asked, my voice cold and methodical. "He's not a big guy, not especially handsome. What's the draw?" "His tool," she said, "and he knows how to use it." "What about us, now that I know?" I was testing the waters, pushing it, but I wasn't sure I cared anymore. Not after this. "You're asking if I'll stop seeing him. My answer is no. You'll just have to deal with it. I don't want to hurt you, Blake, but I'm not going to lie to you. He's going to keep sleeping with me, and that's just how it is," she said. Her matter-of-fact tone was so cold and harsh that I briefly considered teaching her a lesson right then. But I've never touched a woman, and if this was how things were going to be, I'd have to come up with something else. Gordon, though, was a completely different story. He was in serious trouble, though neither he nor my wife at 3:04 a.m. had any idea. I took another sip of tea. "Blake, are you okay?" She seemed to reconsider, maybe feeling guilty about how coldly she had spoken to me. "God, Blake, I'm such an idiot. You saved my life, and this is how I treat you." I still didn't say anything. I just sat there sipping tea, getting angrier by the second. My silence was starting to get to her. "Blake, are you going to say something?" I stayed quiet. Rangers were trained for psychological warfare, and the game had begun. She touched my shoulder. "Blake, say something. For God's sake, talk to me." I didn't. I just looked past her. She switched tactics. "Well, if you've got nothing to say, I'm going to bed. Don't come in until you're ready to talk." I didn't look up or move until I heard the bedroom door slam. Good, I thought. She's off balance. Now I've got the upper hand. She had broken my heart, and not just because of the cheating. It was her heartless attitude that made it clear it was her way or the highway. In my mind, the worst-case scenario was that the highway would hurt her more. That night, and for the next month, I slept on the couch. I didn't react when she called to say she'd be late on Tuesdays and Thursdays as usual. We both knew she was with him those nights. Then she added Saturdays to the schedule. I was sure this was her way of trying to push me into talking to her. I did talk to her about the kids, the house, work, everything except her affair. She was becoming anxious. She knew what I was capable of. I caught her watching me nervously when I worked in the yard. My cold demeanor probably had her wondering when everything would explode. The bitter irony was that while I let things drag on, my hatred grew. But so did my sadness. I loved this woman with everything I had, and I believe she loved me too. She just wanted it all. If we had talked, I knew she would have tried to convince me that her affairs were just about sex and didn't affect our marriage. It almost made me laugh when I thought about how things would eventually unfold. The charade lasted almost a year. We didn't have sex once during that time, and I never cheated on her or confronted her or her lover about their affair. With the help of Gary and Mark, I had collected a mountain of evidence in case of a divorce. We were also digging into Gordon's life, figuring everyone had something to hide. The progress was slow but steady. Yes, almost every state but New York is no fault. But to ensure I could get custody of the kids, I needed undeniable proof that she was unfit as a mother. It wasn't easy, but I was close. I was a bit surprised she hadn't filed for divorce yet. She was clearly angry and frustrated. She mentioned divorce a couple of times, but I just walked away without responding. Finally, I caught a break. I think she was trying to push me into talking and accepting her affairs. She kicked me out. No talk of divorce, just get out until you're ready to talk and work through our issues. I agreed. This time I looked her in the eye, my own filling with tears. I was genuinely sad about her decision, but I also saw an opportunity. I went upstairs to pack a couple of suitcases. When I came out, I heard her on the phone. She was in the kitchen, but I could hear her clearly. "Your plan backfired, Gordon." "No, he's leaving." "No, damn it, he's really leaving. Don't you get it?" "No," I said, "no. Win what? Are you kidding me? You're not half the man he is, except for your tool." "You, ha ha ha. One-on-one with him? You'd last as long as a fart in a hurricane." "No, forget it. We need to cool off for a while." "Yes, but not anytime soon. I need to get my man back." "Yeah, bye." I came down the stairs and she was waiting by the door. "Blake, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Please don't leave," she said. I pushed past her. "Goodbye," I said, and walked out. I ended up at the Pine Tree, the same motel she and her lover had used. I even got the same room they had at least once. The place didn't have a restaurant, but it was cheap, close to my work, and had a bar next door. Alana sat on the bench behind the house, unsure if she felt worse for herself or for me. Her tears hadn't stopped since I left. She felt like a complete idiot. Her man, the one who had protected, saved, and then married her, the one who had fed, clothed, and loved her, she had betrayed him. And for what? A bigger tool. Selfish? No, that didn't even begin to describe her. She felt like a dirtbag, a vile person. And yet, it had been his choice. He wouldn't have lacked anything from her. She wanted to be with him, to love him, adore him. He had never wanted for anything, or so she rationalized. Gordon never had her like Blake had. Gordon never heard her say, "I love you," but Blake heard it every day. How could Blake ever doubt she loved him? She had told him, argued with him, tried to convince him years ago that she wasn't monogamous. Either he hadn't heard or he didn't care. But now, of course, he cared. What could she do now? She didn't even know where he had gone. And what about the kids? God, what a mess. A week later, the doorbell rang just after she had gotten the kids off to school. "Hi, babe," said the tall, dark-haired man with the mustache. "Gordon, I thought I told you we needed to cool it for a while." "Yeah, but I'm too excited," he replied. "You can't sit around here moping forever. You need to get out and do something." She knew what he meant, but the timing couldn't have been worse. Still, she did feel trapped and hopeless. A couple of drinks somewhere sounded nice. "No Zex for you today, Gordon. I just can't do it. But yeah, a couple of drinks wouldn't hurt. I could really use one right now," she said. "Sounds good to me. No pressure. We'll just have some drinks, and you can vent to me." "God knows I need someone to listen," she said. "Blake sure won't. I don't even know where he is. I'm losing my mind." "He'll be back soon. Trust me," said Gordon. "For the kids, if not for you. Guys like him, they're all about family. He actually thinks Zex equals love." She shot him a dirty look, but deep down she knew Gordon was right. Blake had been gone a week, and it made sense he'd call soon, at least to arrange something for the kids. She'd use that chance to finally get him to talk. For a brief moment, she realized how crazy it was to want to fix things with her husband while going out for drinks with her lover. But the feeling disappeared before she could think more about it. She changed, and they headed to the Pine Tree Lounge. Gary arrived at the Pine Tree Motor Lodge at noon just as planned. He had the envelope and knocked on room 103. "Hey, Gary," I said. "You doing okay, man?" Gary asked as he entered the room. "This place is kind of cheap for you, isn't it?" "It's the room they used to screw me over," I said, my voice filled with bitterness. "It has sentimental value, you might say. You got the stuff?" "Oh yeah, he's been stealing from his job. He's a driver and skims about 5% off every delivery. An audit will show it for sure," Gary said. "Film at 7? I asked. "Yep, audio too. He's going down," Gary confirmed. "Where's Mark?" I asked. "Doing what you asked. He's delivering the evidence to his company's bosses. Should be done by now." "How'd you get all this?" I asked. "Easy. We followed the idiot. He's not very smart. Honestly, I'm shocked he hasn't been caught yet. The guy's a total moron. Borderline dumb, and that's being generous," Gary said. "Blake, what's your plan? Mark and I are worried about you, man. You need to stop hiding out here. Have you even seen your kids?" "No, I haven't seen them since I left. I miss them," I admitted. "I'm going to have to go back. I hate the idea of showing up there, but I can't stay away too long or she might turn them against me." "I doubt that," Gary said. "I know you won't want to hear this, but I've known women like Alana, lots of them. They do love their husbands. They just don't see the damage in messing around on the side. No, man, she loves you. She's just clueless. Alana's smart in some ways, but when it comes to Zex, she's a complete idiot." "Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? My problem is figuring out how to fix this. And do I even want to now?" "She screwed me over," I said. "Anyway, I think it's time for a drink. What do you say? There's a bar next door." The two of us were sitting at the bar when they walked in. "Jesus," Gary muttered. "What?" I asked. "Blake, buddy," Gary said, locking eyes with me. "I need you to stay calm." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "Blake, take a deep breath. Your wife just walked in with her boyfriend," Gary said. He grabbed my arm, making it hard for me to turn around. But straining, I managed to look over my shoulder and saw her and her lover. She didn't see me right away, but then she did. Alana's hand shot up to cover her mouth. Even through her fingers, I could tell what she was mouthing. "Oh my God, no." She started crying silently. The a-hole looked in my direction and smirked. My face darkened. I stared at them with dead eyes. Alana reached out her arm toward me, but I sneered. "Screw you," I said quietly. So she had to read my lips to understand. Then I turned my attention to him and pointed. He widened his stance and crossed his arms, daring me. That almost got him eliminated, though he had no idea how close he came. Gary looked down at the floor. I was a mess of emotions, humiliated. The guy was around 6 feet tall while I was only 5'6". Alana, especially in heels, towered over me. She was wearing heels now. The sight wasn't flattering. But one thing I knew, after I broke his legs, Gordon 10-inch would be a lot closer to the ground. Gary saw it coming and gripped me harder. "No, he's going to jail. Bide your time," Gary said. I looked at him, the wisdom of his words finally sinking in. I nodded. I pointed at the a-hole again, who just smirked. Oh, how badly I wanted him in that moment. But instead I had to slink away like a knocking dog with my tail between my legs. God, it was humiliating. Alana watched the scene, and I think she might have been crying. But at that moment, I hated the mother of my children, and that terrified me. I was so close to liquidating them both. While the a-hole was oblivious, I think my wife sensed it. I walked out of the bar without looking back. As I reached my car, I fumbled with my keys, dropping them. As I bent down to pick them up, I heard her voice. "Blake, I'm so sorry," she said. I really am. But Blake, we weren't doing anything. We weren't going to. He just bought me a drink because I was upset and sad about you leaving. I turned and looked at her. You kicked me out, so what's the issue? I did, but I didn't mean it. I'm sorry for being too something. Try cruel and unyielding, I said. Blake, I want to make it right. I owe you, she said. Her words filled me with so much anger that I could barely hold it in. You let me screw you. Consider the debt paid, I said. And hell, I would have saved you without needing payment. So go screw yourself or let him do it. I was falling apart. My voice cracked. Then the worst moment of my life happened. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. My chest heaved, my heart shattered. Everything came flooding out, silent and soaked with tears. She came to me and wrapped her arms around me. For a moment, I felt safe, loved. Then reality hit me again. I pushed her off violently, causing her to stumble. Get away from me, I said between sobs. If I hadn't been humiliated before, I certainly was now. I heard her cry as I got into my car and drove off. Blake, I love you. Come home to me. Meanwhile, Gary had kept her lover pinned down inside the bar, while Alana and I had our scene outside. Just as I pulled out of the lot, Loverboy came out with Gary right behind him. Get out of my way, idiot, Gordon said to Gary. Now, Gary isn't small like me. He's about 5'10" and 175 pounds. Not huge, but not small either. He kept his cool. You have no idea how close you came to dying today, idiot. You might want to learn the act of contrition, Gary said. Alana walked over to him. She knew Gary well. He'd been at all our family gatherings with his wife. Gary, please, I messed up. Tell him I love him. He won't listen to me. Tell him he at least has to come home to see his babies, she said. I'll tell him, Gary replied. But you better get that idiot out of town. Blake's really angry and hurt, Alana. You've hurt him deeply. You tell that coward, Gordon started. Gary reached back and slapped him so hard that Gordon nearly fell to the ground. Say another word about my friend, and you'll be the one I liquidate. Gary turned and called for a cab since I had abandoned him there. Later that afternoon, Gary showed up at my place, a little annoyed. I had forgotten he didn't have a car. I'd left him to deal with Alana and her lover on his own. I apologized, explaining I wasn't thinking straight. We laughed about how he'd handled Gordon. But on a more serious note, Alana had made her point. I needed to see my kids. Even if it meant showing up looking like a spineless fool, I had to go back. Sooner or later, I'd have to face my wife. It seemed like it was going to be sooner. I arrived at the house the next day at 5 o'clock. Daddy, 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 the kids screamed. We hugged, I cried, they smiled, and then we talked. We talked about school, their friends, and everything else. And then they pinned me down. Daddy, come home to us, Shelby said. Mama wants you to, too. I started crying again, but quickly choked it back. God, I'm such a fool, I thought. It's true, Daddy. Alana entered the room for the first time. She had left us alone until now. Whether she had planned it or not, this was the moment she chose to come in. I had to believe she had orchestrated it to her best advantage. Daddy is coming home to us, kids. Starting tonight, she announced. We all want you back, Blake. The kids, and especially me. I looked at her. She could read my thoughts. There was no doubt. Blake, I'm sorry for everything. Please don't let us down. We need you, and we love you. We really do, she said. Her tone was sincere, but her actions the previous day didn't match up. Still, I nodded for the sake of the kids. How long I'd stay was uncertain, probably until her next mistake. Yeah, I backed down. But any dad in my position would understand, even if they wouldn't agree. Alana and I would have to talk it out in the next couple of hours. I talked to the kids before you came. Blake, I want you to know we kind of set you up. But in a good way, I made sure they told you how much they want you back, actively in their lives, she said. As for me, that's all I've been thinking about since you left, she added. And that scene at the lounge? You weren't with your lover planning to, well, have sex? I asked. No, I wasn't. He knew that. I'd been depressed since you left, and I needed a drink. Several, really. He invited me out for that reason. And, of all places, we ended up there. You can imagine my surprise. Probably not unlike yours, she said. I smirked. I guess not. So here we are. And what does that mean? I still can't accept what you've been doing. I can't. I know what I said when we got engaged, but that was then, and this is now. So is Gordon your man, or am I? You can't have both of us. It's one or the other. Do you understand that? I understand. But can I ask you a question? She said. What is it? What is sex to you? Does it define our relationship? Does it define our marriage? I paused for a moment. For me, it's the most intimate and private thing we share. It's how we create our children. It's a significant way I show my love for you, my wife. She nodded. It's those things for me too, Blake. But all of that is tied to the commitment I made to you, and only to you. Without that commitment, sex is just something we did as teenagers, miles away from anything meaningful. It's just a game kids play. A little more intimate, sure, but still a game. You know the saying, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You've told me yourself you've played that game. Yeah, that's true. But there's something you left out, Alana. You didn't mention our wedding vows. For me, keeping those vows ends the games. It's about building trust and real love. Not puppy love or casual games, but something with responsibility. So now I have a question for you. Go ahead. Where does my coming home leave Gordon? Is he or any other man going to be sleeping with my wife? Be honest. She wasn't prepared for the question. I guess he's out of the picture, she said. Does he know that? Am I going to walk in on phone calls, drive past a motel and see your car next to his? Don't lie to me, Alana. Tell me now. Honestly, we haven't talked since yesterday at the pine tree. So no, he doesn't know yet. I told him we'd have to cool it for a while because you were hurt. And yes, I know, cooling it for a while isn't making him history. But that was then, and this is now. I'm not giving you up. So as of this moment, he's history, she said. She surprised me by getting up and going into the kitchen. She came back with the cordless phone and dialed. Yeah, it's me, she said. Someone on the other end spoke. No, and never again. My man is home. He's sitting across from me right now. No, not ever. Huh? You'll need to find someone else. He doesn't understand our relationship. And no, he's not going to try. Don't call me anymore. Please respect my wishes. It's over. Goodbye. She hung up. One more question. Now that Gordon is out, what about other men? One-night stands, quick flings, any of it? I asked. I'm going to say a never again, Blake, and I'll try my best. But you'll have to help me. I'm a habitual born, a 304. You'll really need to help me, she said, struggling to finish her sentence. In my heart, I knew she wouldn't be able to stick to her resolve. Oh, I believed she meant it, but I was almost certain it was beyond her control. For now, though, I was doing it for the kids. The day after we talked and I moved back into the house, I went to work. That weekend, Mark and Gary came by with their wives and kids, and we had a barbecue. It was a good time. We didn't hear anything from Gordon. Alana quit her job at the art shop and took a full-time position at an art supply store, which paid better. I was feeling pretty good, safer. Every now and then, I thought I saw a wistful look from Alana, but I also wondered if I was just being paranoid. One day, I was having lunch about a mile from work with my buddy Roger. The restaurant had those almost black windows, like the ones you see on cars. You could see out, but no one could see in. We were sitting by the window halfway through our meal when a stunning woman walked down the sidewalk and met a man right outside our booth. If the window hadn't been there, we could have reached out and touched them. They embraced and kissed. The woman was tall, athletic, and probably in her mid-30s. The man was huge, about 6'6" and 280 pounds. He looked like a defensive end. I smiled. She's a looker, Roger said. Wouldn't mind getting a piece of that, I grinned. Want me to set you up? He laughed. You know her? Yeah, I do. She's my wife. She'll do anybody. Well, we're getting divorced soon, so if you want, I can ask her for you. Roger spit out his soda all over the table. Jesus, Blake, that's not funny. Maybe not, but it's true. She's my wife, I said. I was facing the entrance when the couple walked in. They were halfway to our table when she saw me. She realized I had a clear view of what had happened outside. Oh my God, Blake. Yeah, it's me, I said. You and I have to stop meeting like this. The man gave me a menacing look. He was twice my size, and his contempt for me was obvious. You know this shrimp? He asked, turning to Alana. She looked horrified. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table, and started to walk out. The big guy grabbed my arm, probably trying to impress her. I twisted his arm under mine and snapped it at the elbow. He dropped to the floor, screaming. I turned to Alana. Do you always go for the big guys? Guess I'm not big enough for you, I said. Blake, we need to talk. It's not what you think. We could hear sirens in the distance, the place filled with cops before I could leave. They cuffed me, but after talking to witnesses, including Roger, they let me go. The paramedics treated the guy, and we left. Alana followed me to my truck. "Blake, we need to talk. It's not what you think," she said. I couldn't believe she said that. For the moment, I found it amusing. Later, I'd probably break down, but right then, the absurdity of it all was what stood out. "And what about what happened on the sidewalk?" I asked. She just stared, silent. Roger and I drove off. That evening, I moved out. Alana didn't fight me. I guess she knew it was over. She couldn't or wouldn't stop her behavior, and I wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. She told me that the guy I'd taken down had been hitting on her at the supermarket for weeks, but she always brushed him off. On the one day I decided to have lunch out, she finally gave in. They were planning to go to a motel after lunch. That they ended up where I was eating was pure coincidence. Some higher power was either looking out for me or punishing her. Neither of us was sure which, but the marriage was done. "You really hurt him," Alana said. "He was too big to play with. I had to take him down," I said. "Bad luck for him." "He'll be eating left-handed for a while," she said. "Blake, I'm sorry. I am who I am, and I guess I always will be. I won't fight the divorce, and we'll share custody of the kids," she said. I just nodded. I was angry, relieved, sad. Everything at once. It had been a long road, but we had reached the end. I talked to the kids, told them I needed to get my own place, but that they could visit anytime. They didn't like it, but when I told them I'd take them to the movies on Saturday and plan activities every week, they reluctantly accepted. This time I met up with Gary, Mark, and Roger at the Pine Tree. It had become our hangout. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting to see Alana with some new guy, or maybe even Gordon. But not this time. Not today. A week after I moved out, Gordon was arrested. I'd nearly forgotten about him, but he finally got what was coming. If he was shocked, Alana was even more so. She attended his trial and basically stood by him as he went down for a 5-year sentence. I later found out she visited him in jail. It was a sad scene. They were clearly falling for each other. All that talk she'd given me about him not meaning anything went out the window. I guess she needed someone who understood her particular needs. Someone like her. The upside was that she didn't blame me. She knew I'd orchestrated it, but I wasn't the one selling stolen goods. They caught him red-handed, putting stolen items into the back of someone's truck. Our divorce was finalized peacefully within 6 months. Irreconcilable differences. The kids stayed with Alana, and I made her promise no man would ever live in the house. I was there every Saturday to see my kids. "Alana, I'll stick to this divorce agreement. You'll get the child support, and I'll be available to babysit whenever you need. But no man who isn't your husband can enter the house. Agreed?" "I'd already made that decision," Alana replied. "You don't have to worry. You saw what happened to Gordon and the guy at the restaurant. Keep that in mind. I'll know if you try anything shady." It was bound to happen, though. Even a guy like me gets lucky once in a while. About a year after the divorce, I met Kelly Halverson. She worked at the novelty shop next to the Pine Tree. I went in to buy a gift for Mark's wife's birthday. "Will that be all, sir?" the saleslady asked. "Your phone number would be nice," I replied. She rolled her eyes and closed the bag. Then she gave me a strange look. 555-0-51296, she said. "But shouldn't you ask for my name first?" "I already know it. It's on your name tag. Kelly Halverson." "Oh, right," she said. "And yours?" Blake Ritter." That night I called her. I was hesitant because I was still tied to Alana in some ways. Divorced, but with lingering feelings, not to mention our kids. The problem was that Alana had too many ties to other men, and I couldn't handle it. So I gave Kelly a shot. We went out for dinner, just to get to know each other. Let me tell you about Kelly. She was 32, about my height, 5'6" or 5'7". She had a bit of extra weight on her slim frame, shoulder-length brown hair, and a rather plain face. All in all, she was the definition of average. But what she lacked in beauty, she made up for in personality. She was working her way through nursing school, held a full-time job, and rarely dated. She was my kind of woman. "So how about a second date?" I asked as I walked her to her door after that first night. "Huh, really?" she replied. "I don't get many second dates. In fact, you're the first guy to ask me out in a while. I know I'm not that pretty. I'm just me, whatever that is," she said seriously. I sensed she'd been hurt before. Well, we sure had something in common, didn't we? "Kelly, you're perfect to me. I don't know your history, but I'd love to take the time to find out. It might take 30 or 40 dates. "Sound good?" I said, smiling. She eyed me suspiciously. "Really? You're not just trying to get me into bed?" I laughed. "No guarantees, but I'd like to know you better first. If you let me, that is." Over the next few weeks, we dated regularly, working around her school schedule. About 2 months after we met, things changed. After a movie, she handed me her house key as I walked her to the door. I looked at her confused. "Well, open the door and let us in," she said. I was surprised. We'd done plenty of making out, but this felt different. I didn't want to take advantage of her. I didn't want it to feel cheap. Then it hit me. I loved her. I really did. I opened the door and motioned for her to go in. She stood by the couch, and I knew what was about to happen. But I also knew something she didn't. I walked slowly toward her, both of us nervous. I stopped about 2 feet away, hands at my sides, and knelt down. "Kelly, I love you. Will you marry me?" I asked. Her eyes widened. "What? Will you do me the honor of marrying me? I don't have a ring yet, but we can pick one out tomorrow if you say yes." "Oh, Blake, of course I'll marry you." She knelt down and kissed me long and hard. We sank to the floor together. She was crying. "No tears now. Let's save those for later," I said. We kissed, undressed each other, and spent the night together. The next morning was a new beginning for both of us. We bought the rings later that day, and were married at the courthouse 2 weeks later. Kelly's arrival into my life was well received by Alana. The kids called her Aunt Kelly, and we were fine with that. About a year later, Gordon got out on good behavior. Alana visited me to ask if Kelly and I could take the kids for a couple of weeks. I agreed without hesitation. "So, what's the occasion, Alana?" I asked. "Blake, please don't get mad, but..." She was struggling to get it out. "Alana, just say it. I won't get upset." "Well, Gordon's getting out the day after tomorrow," she said. "We're getting married." "Blake?" I must have looked confused. I knew she'd been visiting him in prison regularly, but I didn't expect this. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. "I see. Blake, Gordon won't come between you and the kids, I promise. We've talked about it. It'll be the same as before, except we're adding him to the mix. He knows we messed up, and now we're moving forward. Okay?" I nodded. "Okay." Just then, Kelly walked in. "We're going to have the kids for a couple of weeks," I said. "Alana's getting married." Kelly smiled. It was clear the future would be interesting for all of us.